Welcome to this episode of Norms Lab. Norms Lab is an initiative of the Anglophone West Africa Social Norms and Agency Learning Collaborative. This is a space where we talk about everything that has to do with social change, issues around gender, and how it affects you as an individual and me as a person. And today, what we're talking about is something that honestly is very dear to my heart. We're talking about how to continue to shift harmful social norms through entertainment media or even through faith-based and community champions. To unpack this, I'm joined by two phenomenal women, Aishat Olufadi Ahmed, a public health specialist and social norms researcher who led the charge on this project. Aishat, I know you've practically lived and breathed this project. It's great to have you with us today.
Good to be here, Angela. Thanks for having us.
Also, we have Oluwafunmilayo Rahim, a strategist and researcher who really helped crack open what works in real life and what doesn't. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right into it, right? We're going behind the scenes of this fascinating study that they have done that explores different kinds of interventions, from viral TV shows to trusted community leaders who are challenging norms across Nigeria. So let's start with you, Aisha. Let's start from the very, very beginning of this project, right? This was part of a bigger global effort, but you decided to zoom in on Nigeria. Why was that so important to you?
All right, thanks for that question, Angela. So I'm sure a lot of us in our lives in this country, especially us women, at one point or the other, we've been faced with the challenges of social norms. We know how some norms would say, oh, you cannot take decisions by yourself. You cannot go to the hospital and seek health-related services by yourself. And some of us that have lived in more rural communities have also been spoken to about how this can change with the times by maybe our community leaders or our traditional leaders. So it was pretty interesting to me when we started to talk about a global effort to check out how social norms are being changed across low and middle income countries, Nigeria inclusive, and how we have to zoom into Nigeria, find out how it is nuanced to our own country, and then let's find out what really works. You know, how these interventions actually work and how others can even adopt it. And maybe step by step, one approach at a time, we can actually eradicate or at least minimize the effect of these social norms in the country.
Thank you very much, and that makes so much sense. You know, sometimes we just forget that what works in the global context really may not apply to us. And there's that need to continue to nuance those, strategies so that they fit for purpose and we begin to see those results. So I think that's really, Nigeria is its own universe. So our problems are different from the rest of the world, right? I wondered, Oluwafunmilayo, do you want to add anything to that though?
So I think one thing we did differently was looking at what works for us, like you said. And to do that, we did consultations with implementers. We didn't just go ahead with only that review. We now thought, okay, can we speak to those people that are implementing? Ask them one-on-one, what worked, what did not work, why did it not work? And using that approach, it just kind of helped us to really now understand better than what we read on paper. I mean, we're not talking to people that went to the field to get these things done. So it was just easier to now get their perspective, and that's one thing I think makes this work unique. The fact that we didn't just read or do or just pick what we had on paper, we consulted with them, we had in-person consultation, informal meetings and all of that.
Thank you so much, Fumi. I think you already began to touch on my next question, which was really around how you go about these things. I've heard you say you spoke to community leaders and all, but Aisha, that's really fascinating, right? And I can imagine that these conversations with community leaders and people on the ground, they must have been very rich. But what other things, aside from those, did you do in bringing to light some of these works that have been very strategic for us and helped change social norms?
Okay, so let me start from a personal experience of mine that would kind of explain this a little better. So while I was working at an HIV clinic at one time, I recall we had a lot of patients and some of them were always so downtrodden, feeling really sad about their lives. But we had these faith organizations coming. They speak to the people, they tell them, oh, you're not alone. They help them understand that you cannot be stigmatized all your lives. And they even speak to those that are around them and help them understand these people need support. I mean, we understand that some people arrived at where they are by certain poor choices they may have made, but that doesn't mean they have to live with that regret for the rest of their lives. And it made some of my patients a lot happier. So when they consult with me, I find that what these faith leaders said to them actually comforted them because they backed it up with sermons. So this particular intervention, this particular study, was a very interesting thing while we're doing the desk review. So what we did was we went through all the interventions in Nigeria that we could find, those that were implemented from like 2014 till now. And we just went through all of their websites, tried to find what they have documented. But then to complement this, we had to go speak to the implementers themselves, one-on-one. This way we had more nuanced insights. We really wanted to see if we had certain questions, we could just speak with them. Call them A. We saw that you wrote this, but then this doesn't answer this particular question. For instance, around how you evaluated the success of your intervention, and would like to really know more about this. So we spoke to these people, and because of this particular study, it made me understand what those people were doing at the time. It just seemed like a campaign at that time to me.
People just talking about
people just came and they're just preaching. But in doing this study, it made me understand that these people aren't just going around talking to people and lifting their spirits. It's something they're trying to do to sustain some there's a message that they're carrying, and they're hoping that it's sustained, not just within their circle, but also those people that they were able to touch with this messaging and backing it up with sermons. So this study, what we did, desk reviews, speaking one-on-one, we even gathered a lot of social norm experts in a room, and we discussed our findings. They validated, they spoke to it, they even gave us way more critical insights. So behind the scenes, that's what this study has done.
Thank you so much, and I can just imagine a Friday sermon changing the life of a young lady that may have strayed wayward. I think that's really powerful. It sees the effect or the power, or no, not the power, the influence that our religious leaders can have in actually changing.
If I may add, there's this implementer that specifically added that when they go to northern communities, and they can't just come and say, family planning. There was pushback. The communities did not want to hear family planning. They don't want to hear source of joy, source of this. So what this implementer said was they had to change the wording to something more culturally acceptable, and they used the word child spacing, back to not just scriptures, but also the economy. How the economy currently is. I mean, the more children you have, the more strain on your pockets. So it's not just, according to the scripture, do this. Also, do not add on to your burden. So that actually stuck with me as well. These approaches, there's so many unique approaches that these implementers use, and it was pretty interesting to know.
Yeah, that's case in point. I've seen experiences myself back in the day working in Nasarawa. You go to a rural community and you see them just giving birth. I mean, just using that example. And I'm sorry, if I don't give birth, who will help me on the farm? And I'm like, hello. No. Those are some norms that we've traditionally seen. And it's great to see how the religious leaders are shaping all of this. And maybe I come to you now, Fumi. We've talked about religious leaders in those settings, but there's also a place for media. We know that the digital space right now, the world is really, really big on media. And you see people taking a lot of things that they see from their influencers on Instagram or Twitter as the Lord and whole of everything, right? Did you find anything on entertainment media and how they sort of perpetuate or change some of these norms? And I mean, aside from social media as well, things like TV shows, like, did you see anything that may help? Yeah?
Just to start with that, I would like to talk about the show that I want to believe everybody knows, Jennifer's Diary.
Funke Akindele, Amy, Nicole, Jennifer.
And there's something about Jennifer's Diary that really popped out. About women empowerment, right? And that was one of the. But for one intervention that you used, TV show that I really dived into was MTV Sugar. Right, that program ran for a very long time, about 10 years. Spoke about sexual and reproductive health, HIV, practicing safe sex, and all of that. And one thing that TV show was able to do was reach millions of young people. I mean, for a show that is still running, and has been running for the past 10 years, it has shaped the way people see those things, like how to practice safe sex. If you even get this disease, how can you still be safe? How can you protect yourself, right? And that is one thing that has come to stay with the entertainment media. Another show, right? I won't call it a show, but it used entertainment media is, they call it Purple Brand, and it was launched by Voice for Change. Basically, what this thing did was just talk to men about positive masculinity. It's not when you eat your woman that you're a man.
Oh, tell me about it.
Like a Lord and Savior that you're a man, you get it. So yeah, you have to be positive. What is equality in the home? And that really helped you because, I mean, that show used, correct me if I'm wrong, they used a bit of quantitative approach to measure success, right? And there was a big shift in it, like, okay, this is what the men saw as being masculine before this intervention now. Another interesting one they used media is this show, it's called What She Wore.
Okay, What She Wore. Oh, okay. That one we've had a lot, but let's hear.
And then what this program did was basically have like a gallery show of what girls wore when they were raped. And it was just trying to instill it in the heart of people that it is not what you wear that makes you get raped. It's just the fault of the rapist. It's not yours, right? I mean, this was some of the shows we were able to like get that use entertainment media, and the feedback, the change in behavior was actually very huge. You know, because for the fact that these entertainment media interventions ran for a longer period of time compared to the ones that used Fate and Cultural Champions, we could really assess the behavioral impact of it.
That's great. So I can imagine a young man just watching his favorite show and he ends up talking to his friends about consent, because that's something you don't typically see men talk about. So it's great to see that. I think there was one advert that ran a long time ago, I can't remember the name, about condoms. It just, you know, condoms is one thing that you can't walk into the store and say you want to buy. But I remember the period where it was an advertisement on how to use condoms, and I think data eventually showed that a lot of people actually started buying condoms after that, because I mean, if you don't buy condom, HIV is plenty. You will get HIV. You know, there's a lot of things that affect. So it's really great to see some of these things that are changing the norms. So now let's go to some things that you've actually found, some learnings or reflections. It's incredible groundwork that we've seen from this research, and I think one thing people will be very curious to know is what are the biggest takeaways, right? What's that thing that actually moves the needle? Because when you talk about social norms, there are things that are deeply ingrained. Like, you hear people talking about, you want to change what my forefathers have set precedence on. What is not affecting me? So what is that thing that you think is changing the needle towards shifting social norms, harmful social norms particularly?
Yeah, one thing I would say is some of these interventions we found try to do what we call community-centered intervention. Okay. Right? We know that you believed in these norms for the longest of time. Let's take, for example, a study called Slovak that we found that says women are now allowed.
Sorry, what did you say the name of the study?
Slovak, like
Slovak.
Slovak. Slovak. Let's say it's just Slovak.
Tell me, sorry, I'm not British.
Okay, so that one of the lessons from my intervention was that women were not allowed to plant cassava because where did you get that money from?
Right. So I can't have money without that problem.
I mean, as a woman, you're not expected to. But now, one thing these interventions did differently was,
that's a community. Apologies. That's a community. I just want to add to it. So you're talking. It's the same one that promoted incest, breast ironing. Same community.
This day and age. Oh yes.
So those are the things that I was trying to address. I don't know. It's scary.
But I mean, one thing I think they did differently was, let's enter from the point where they know, where they are used to. And that's why we basically talk about this FCC, right? If someone you listen to every Friday, every Sunday comes and tells you, we know what we're doing this thing, but it doesn't mean it's right. They're using words that you are used to. They're saying things that it's not very strange, not very far-fetched, but it's new, right? So there was a bit of community-driven approach, like, okay, we'll leave it to you. And one thing that did also was help with sustainability, because when we leave it to you, you want to run with it. I mean, there's helped you, you've seen the difference, right? So you want to run with it. Another thing I think they did differently, I don't know if I should talk about the entertainment media now, but it's basically the same thing, right? Use the community, make it same, it is theirs. it is your project. So you run with it even when we're no longer there. Some of those great leaders were also trained. There was a bit of capacity building. So you won't just go and say, we want you to talk about child spacing and then let them run with it. No. There was a particular project. I think I'm forgetting the name now. They sat down with the culture with the faith leaders, developed documents to train them, and after they were done developing, they passed it down to the grassroots. Like, okay, this is what we'll be using to teach, let's say, sexual reproductive health. Okay,
That's
so
a Kaji project.
Yeah,
Yes,
CCAAIG, yeah. So okay, this is what we use to train them, and then when they're done building, they do a bunch of reviewing, both the implementers and prophet and religious leaders, and they now used to train our prophet like at the grassroots. Yeah, that kind of thing it worked. I mean, it was proven to be something that worked across almost all of interventions to use FCC, capacity building, teaching them what to say. Yeah, how to say it so it's accepted.
Great. So I say a lot about community interventions being led, and that will lead to some sustainability and changing the norms. Aisha, I wonder if you also want to weigh in on toxic masculinity, because we know that that's one norm that's been perpetuated over time, right? Are there any things that you found that you think, is helping to shift the needle there? We mentioned MTV Sugar earlier, where a young man sees the show and is happy to talk to his friends about content. Do you think there are any other things there that people can run with?
Yeah, so there was a statement I came across.
Yeah.
It says that if there's a group of men sitting down drinking beer, and you come and tell them, oh no, you cannot talk to your wives in a certain way, there's a very high chance that they throw the bottles at you.
Oh yeah. Tell me.
Because
Tell me I'll my wife.
You are not a trusted person. You're not someone they can listen to. However, if you have trusted leaders and people of influence, because men are actually a reference group that we want as allies in this norm-shifting journey. Because it's a journey. They are men, they're the reference group that we want as allies. Because let's talk family planning. If a man says no, my wife is not going to go for family planning, there's nothing you can say. In Kaduna, exactly. In Kaduna, I had this woman. I was speaking with her, and I was asking her why her 3 children weren't immunized. She said her husband said they cannot be immunized.
I mean, there's no reason to.
There was no way she would take them for immunization. And the same husband was the one that said, oh, they're not putting a cap on the number of children they're having.
Oh, wow. So she's a best giving machine.
Exactly.
Oh,
So one thing that this study has uncovered is the fact that once you have learned and trusted leaders, either religious or traditional, men tend to listen. It might be difficult at first. Like the Breakthrough Action, what they did was they envisioned possible pushbacks from their fellow men. So they created something called a crisis group. Something that immediately there is a possible uproar, they would contain it immediately among the men, they themselves. So as much as they're calling men to listen to their sermons, listen to their teachings about sexual and reproductive health and why it is good for them to space the number of children they have, they also created something called a crisis group to cushion the possible effect of pushbacks. So toxic masculinity is something that exists, we cannot deny this. But then when you have trusted leaders and you create something called community ownership, like she has spoken about, those capacity building, if you give the community a sense of ownership of this intervention that you brought to them, they will tend to hold on to it way longer, and then it takes time. That is something every implementer should understand. You cannot just wake up one day and say 6 months time you want this particular norm change. It is impossible. You need to put in the time factor to make sure this happens. So toxic masculinity exists. It can be eradicated, but it takes trusted leaders, community ownership, and time.
So guys, have you heard that? Women, I'm talking to you. If you are looking for a man in your life and the man doesn't have someone that can talk to him, when I say carry your butter and run, because babe, you are setting yourself up for issues. So I think that's very, very important to hear. Like, people need to have people that can speak, because sometimes even my own head, they touch small. Please, I said it under my breath. But when you have people that you can really listen to, it helps to change the direction of things. I think one thing I also want to chip in aside the community initiatives, having trusted leaders, is we all have a say in changing these norms. Like, we can be storytellers too. Even from the littlest things you post on your social media, you can be a change maker too. So let it start from you. Don't wait till somebody tells you or somebody calls you to speak to you. You can do it in your own very, very little corner. And it's been so great just talking about this. And now I want to talk about what next. We've talked about some of the gaps. We've talked about what we've seen that works, what's changing the needle. With all of this, where do we go from here? How do we make sure that people who are implementing on the field and in the communities can actually use some of the information that you found? So maybe we'll start with you, Aisha. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons we're doing this. We're talking to you already, letting you know some of the things that we have found and what you can possibly use. Something I think we missed was a couple of implementers admitted that when they go into communities, aside from verbally trying to get the buy-ins, you unfortunately start with incentives as well.
Right. So once you start, then you
exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. So speaking to implementers now, I'd say whatever it is that you're going to design, whatever project you're going to design, you ensure that it is designed with sustainability, success measurement, and lack of incentives in mind.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you do, as soon as those incentives are introduced and they stop coming, nothing moves. So other than this podcast where we're talking to you, there's several other channels that we're going to disseminate our findings to see if we can reach as many implementers as possible, letting them know what worked with the interventions that we found and what they can actually, lessons that we learned, and they can actually adopt as well in their own intervention designs.
Great. So designing for sustainability from day one. It feels so obvious when you say it, but we often miss it a lot of the time.
Difficult. You sit with the proper implementer, and the next thing they're telling you, how do we do this? On paper it just seems very easy. But then, how do you do this, especially with limited funds? How do you do this?
Very interesting.
So with all these insights, Aisha and Fumi, where do we go from here? How do we actually make sure that implementers and communities can actually use this research?
So one thing implementers could do, like according to some of our lessons learned, is some entertainment media channels could have already created or curated repository for learnings for other entertainment media interventions where you can access it freely or for a fee, and that way you won't need an influencer. Another thing that you could do is to ensure that there is a community ownership and they understand the value of what you're bringing to them. That way the incentives are not overly important. So if implementers are going to use this information, they need to understand that designing their intervention or creating their TOCs as a theory of change of the intervention has to come with an original plan with sustainability, success measurement, and lack of incentives. That way you ensure that your intervention runs for a longer period. So this particular information that we're putting out right now, and there are going to be several other channels of dissemination, is going to be accessible to implementers everywhere in this country and other LMICs that may also need them. And they'll be able to get information about the lessons learned and how they can adopt this and use some of these actionable insights.
Yeah, so I hear you say sustainability, and it's funny when you say it because a lot of the time we think about it, but we often miss it a lot, and it's very, very important. So Fumi, do you want to add on that? Just beyond measuring like impact in numbers, like how can you, what next?
Okay, so what next for us now is we're putting together a report. Okay. And this report would contain all of these interventions that are reviewed. What works for them, what did not work, how did they sustain it, and all of that, right? So at a glance, when looking at this report, you can just really state, oh, this is what works and this is what did not work. Also, that report would contain lessons learned. We already said we met with those implementers and persons, we put them together in a room. So for everything we learned from them, we actually just curated everything to the report too, and also suggestions for policy makers and future implementers. So watch out for that. It's going to be on any of the OC platforms when it's done and ready. We're at the review stage right now, but once that is done, it's going to implementers. Once they pick it up, they know what to do and how to do it better.
Thank you so much, Fumi and Aisha. It's been a very, very important and interesting conversation with you. But just before we wrap up, right, I want us to come back to the big question that we had when we started. We said, after everything that you've seen and heard, what does it really take to shift harmful social norms in Nigeria? Maybe in just one sentence or two.
Collaboration.
Okay. Yeah. Collaboration.
Commitment.
Okay.
Time. Collaboration, commitment, time.
And not just that, just jump more on time, right? We noticed that some interventions around for a long period of time had a good, like we're able to, so these implementers were able to measure behavioral change compared to those that ran for shorter periods, right? So yeah, time is very important. Let this program run. Leave it to the community, let them take ownership of it, let it run for a long time. And that way we can now measure the long-term impact of the interventions.
Thank you so much. I really love that. I think it's a very, very powerful statement. Time, collaboration, and trust. Transformation. Now I'm adding my own, right? But you see, these are things that we think really matters right now and captures the moments for us in Nigeria and what Nigeria needs. So Aisha, Fumi, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. And to our listeners, thank you in advance for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to Norms Lab on Spotify or other podcasts that you use or wherever you tune in and find this link, right? Until next time, keep questioning the norms and keep building the future you want to see in Nigeria. Thank you. Bye for now.